Alright, so here in 7.5, and this is actually just 7.5, not 7.5a, we're going to look at solving radical equations. All that a radical equation is when your x is inside your radical, so your square root or cubed root or whatever. So if you look at this first one is a radical equation because the x is inside the square root. This second one is written as a fraction exponent. Now remember we talked about those before. I'm just going to rewrite this. The 3 is the exponent, or the root here, and the 2, the numerator, is your exponent. Now see how your x is inside your square root, or cubed root in this case. So this is a radical equation. So it could be written as a fraction exponent. This bottom one is not, because the root 3, that's what's in the square root, the x isn't. So this is not a radical equation. To solve this, you would just subtract the root 3, and x would equal 10 minus root 3. So this is not a radical equation. It's still an equation, but it's not a radical equation because it doesn't have the x inside the radical, inside the square root, cubed root, whatever. Now we're going to solve these. As we solve them, you do have to check every answer. So keep that in mind. We're going to solve and then we're going to check. We're going to check some by hand, and then I want to show you a quick way to check in your calculator. All right, so here's our first equation. You'll see it's a radical equation because right there my x is inside the square root. So what I'm going to do is get my square root or cubed root or whatever by itself first. So I'm going to subtract the 2. Once I have it by itself, then I'll go through and sort of get rid of it. Now here this is square root, so it's like an understood 2. I'm going to go through and square this, so I'll get rid of that square root. Now I can do that if I balance on the other side. So I'll have 3x minus 2 equals 16. And then I'll go through and solve like I normally would here. So add 2. 3x equals 18. X is 6 when I divide by the 3. All right, so I have my answer. Remember I told you you do want to make sure that you check these. This one, I'll tell you, go ahead and tell you, is going to check out, but some of them won't. We're going to have one here in a second. So you do want to make sure that you check them. All right, so here's my equation. I'm going to plug in my 6 and go through and see if this simplifies down. So I'll have 18 minus 2 is 16. And square root of 16 is 4. All right, so this looks good because 2 plus 4 is 6. So this is a good answer. Now, it's just a coincidence that these are 6's right here. It could be any number. It doesn't have to be the answer as long as they're the same, as long as it equals out. Okay, so let's look at one more. Well, we're going to look at a few more than that, but let's look at the next one. Okay, so looking at this, you'll see it's in fraction exponent form. We're not going to change that form over. We're going to leave it in this form, but I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get the x minus 2 to the 2/3 by itself, so I'm going to get rid of the 2. So get the stuff that's raised to the fraction exponent, get it by itself. And 50 divided by 2 is 25. Okay, now I'm not going to change this one over because it's easier to take care of in this form. I'm going to do sort of the same thing I did a minute ago. I'm going to raise it to a power. Now when I raise it to a power, I'm going to raise it to the reciprocal power of what I had here. The reason for that is then when I go through and multiply them together, everything will cancel out. And same as before, I can do whatever I want as long as I balance over here. So I have x minus 2 over on this left-hand side, and then 25 to the 3/2 power. So let's see what that turns out to be. So 25 to the 3/2 power, and I get 125. All right, so 125. And then I'll just add my 2. So x equals 127. All right, now remember that we need to check this one. Now this time I want us to check in our calculator. From here on out, I'm going to check them in my calculator, but I want to show you how to do it kind of step by step here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my answer in as x. So 127, and I'm going to hit this button store right here. Y'all see where my cursor is? I'm going to hit store as x. Now what that's going to do is every time I push x in my calculator, it's going to plug in 127. So what I'm going to be able to do is just go through and put in the left-hand side of my equal sign. It should equal 50. If it does, then we're good. If it doesn't, this is not a good answer. All right, so I'm going to do that. So I have 2x minus 2 to the 2/3 power. And there's my 50. So I end up with 50 equals 50, which means this is a good answer. All right, so let's get a little bit more involved here, because so far we've only had an x inside your square root or here fraction exponent. What we're going to have now is an x inside and an x outside. Now this type of situation, be careful on. If you don't check, you're going to have some answers that you should have thrown out that you don't. Make sure you check your work. All right, so I'm going to get my square root by itself, so I'm going to subtract the 5. So I have square root of x minus 3 equals x minus 5 when I bring it to the other side of the equal sign. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did a minute ago. I'm going to square this to get rid of my square root and balance over here. Now, that's easy enough on the left-hand side. The square root and the squared cancel out, and I get x minus 3. Over here, I'm going to have to go through and find x minus 5 squared, which means FOIL them together. So I have x squared minus 5x minus another 5x. It's 10x total plus 25. And this is what I need to solve. Now this time you'll notice it's a quadratic. So I'm going to have to get everything on one side of the equal sign and either solve by factoring or quadratic formula. So I'm going to move my x over. While I'm at it, I'll go ahead and move my 3 over. I'm going to get everything on one side of the equal sign. So I have x squared minus 11x plus 28. And then I'm going to try to factor this thing. So let's see, I think minus 4 minus 7 will work. So if you need to check that, pause it real quick and check it. And then I'll set those equal to 0 and solve. So I'll have 4, x minus 4 equal to 0, solve it, I'll get 4. And x minus 7 equal to 0, solve it, I'll get 7. Now you'll notice I have 2 answers this time. I want to make sure that I check those. So here's my original equation, x minus 3 plus 5, square root of x minus 3 plus 5 equals x. All right, so I'm going to check my 4 first. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to check this one by hand. So 4 minus 3 is 1 plus 5, and my x is 4. So I'll have square root of 1 is 1 plus 5. So 6 equals 4. That means 4 is not a good answer. I've got to throw it out. And then I'll check 7. So I'll have 7 minus 3, so 4, plus 5 equals 7. So square root of 4 is 2. This one looks good because 7 equals 7. So that's a good answer, 4's not. Now you could also have checked it in your calculator like we did the last one. Either way is fine. You can check it by hand, you can check it in your calculator. Now I want you to notice one of the answers that you found in your whole process here did not work. It's called an extraneous solution. We've had these before, but an extraneous solution is like an extra answer. It's an answer that comes up that's sort of like extra. It's not a real one, but it pops up. So you need to make sure you check these. If you don't check them, there are going to be some answers that you have that aren't real answers. So make sure you check. You have to check them. All right, we're going to do two more. So here's our next one. I already have the square root by itself, so I'm going to go ahead and square both sides. So I end up with 9x squared plus 4. And then on this side, I need to square the 3x plus 2. So go through and FOIL that together. So I'll have 9x squared plus 6x plus 6x plus 4, or 9x squared plus 12x plus 4. Now I want you to notice as I get everything grouped on the same side of the equal sign, I'm going to move everything over here to the right. My 9x squareds cancel. That's just a coincidence. It just happens to happen. Also, my 4's right here are going to cancel. So I'll have 0 equals 12x. Let me go ahead and divide by my 12 and solve for that x. X equals 0. Now I want you to notice, depending on your situation, you could have a little bit different type of solving you need to do. Once you've squared these and gotten rid of your square roots, solve whatever you have left. Use whatever method of solving you need to use, but solve what you've got left. All right, so this time let's go through and let's check this in our calculator. We did the last one by hand, so let's do this one in our calculator. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to just clear this stuff out, and then I'm going to take 0, my answer was 0, and store it as x. And then I'll go through and put in my left-hand side of the equal sign. So I have square root of 9x squared plus 4. That gives me 2. Okay, so over here I have 2. And then on this side, I'll plug in 0 for the x. And remember, my x already has the 0 plugged in for it. So I have 3x plus 2, which is also 2. You could have done that one probably in your head. So 2 equals 2. It's a good answer. So I'm going to keep it. All right, and here's our last one we're going to do. Now this one you'll see is a fraction exponent again, but it does have an x inside the fraction exponent, which is like inside the radical, and it has one outside. All right, so I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to raise it to the reciprocal power, so it's like 2 over 1. 2 over 1 is like just 2, so those will all cancel, and I'll get 5 minus x equals x plus 1 squared. So x squared plus x plus 1, or x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then I'm going to get everything on one side of the equal sign. It's a quadratic, so I need to solve it by either factoring or quadratic formula, so I need to get everything grouped together. So x squared plus 3x minus 4. Now I'm going to try to factor this one. If it won't factor, I'll use quadratic formula. So I think to get 3, I could use 4 and 1. And since I want a positive 3, I'll make the 4 positive, the 1 negative. And then I'm going to set these equal to 0 and solve. So when I set this equal to 0 and solve, I'll get negative 4. And when I set the x minus 1 equal to 0 and solve, I'll get 1. All right, now that's great, but I need to make sure I go back up here and I check my answers. Now I've got to check each one individually. So I'm going to just start by checking the negative 4. Now I'm going to do this one again in my calculator. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the negative 4 and store it as x. Then I'm going to go through and type in the left-hand side of the equal sign, see what it equals. Type in the right-hand side, I could probably do that in my head, see what it equals, and then see if they equal each other or not. All right, so I have 5 minus x to the 1/2 power, which is 3, okay? So 3. And when I plug in, I'm just going to do this one by hand because I can. -4 plus 1 is -3. They do not check out. I got different answers. So -4 is not an answer. Now I still need to go through and check 1. 1 might be an answer, it might not be an answer, but I need to go through and check it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to check 1. So 1 store as x. And then I'll type in the left-hand side of the equal sign. So 5 minus x to the 1/2 power. And I got 2. And then if I plug in a 1 right here, I'd have 1 plus 1, which is also 2. So 1 is a good answer. Now I want you to notice that you have to check these, because you will have some extraneous answers. Now, maybe not in every problem, but I'm going to guarantee you, I'm promising you, that on a test or a quiz, I'm going to give you some that have those extra answers because I want to know if you're checking or not. So make sure that you're going through and you're checking all your answers. You're looking for those extraneous ones, the extra answers that you need to throw out. All right, so that's 7.5.